Welcome to an introduction and overview of Exceptional Student Education, a guide for OCPS families of students with disabilities. This training module was developed to help parents and families navigate the waters of ESE and become effective advocates for their children so they can teach their children to self-advocate as adults. Exceptional student education is the term used in the state of Florida and by OCPS to define special education or special ed. ESE is the acronym used to discuss these services. In Florida, ESE includes students with disabilities and students who are gifted. Orange County Public Schools currently has approximately 35,000 ESE students. This includes approximately 24,000 students with disabilities and approximately 11,000 gifted. Approximately 12% of the entire student population identified as ESE. ESE today is very different from the special education services presented when we were children. OCPS works diligently to ensure that students in ESE enjoy the same learning and social experiences as students in the general education classroom. The Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act is the federal law that we commonly refer to as IDEA. The purpose of IDEA is to ensure that children with disabilities have a free, appropriate public education available to meet their unique needs and to prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. The impetus of the law was to open doors for students with disabilities unconditionally and without exception, regardless of the severity of the child's disability. IDEA is based on three basic concepts. Prior written notice must be given to the parent a reasonable amount of time before the district proposes or refuses to initiate or change the identification, evaluation, or educational placement of a student with a disability, or prior to the provision of a free, appropriate public education to the student. Informed consent means that the parent must be given all information relevant to the activity for which the consent is sought. Informed consent must be in the parent's native language or other mode of communication. The parent understands and agrees in writing to the activity for which his or her consent is sought. The parent understands that granting consent is voluntary on the part of the parent and may be revoked at any time. If a parent revokes consent, that revocation is not retroactive, which means it does not negate an action that occurred after the consent was given and before the consent was revoked. One of the most critical components of IDEA is parent participation. Several requirements must be met by local education agencies, or LEAs, to be sure the parent is aware of their opportunity to participate in the educational decisions regarding their child and has been provided every opportunity to do so. The LEA must ensure that parents attend every IEP meeting or otherwise have the opportunity to participate in the meeting at a mutually agreed upon time. The parent must be notified a reasonable amount of time before the meeting of the date, time, location, purpose, and who will be in attendance. The parent must be afforded the opportunity to participate in meetings with respect to the identification, evaluation, and educational placement of the student, as well as the provision of FAPE, or free, appropriate public education, to the student. Under IDEA, parents are entitled to certain rights known as procedural safeguards. Parents must be given notice of these procedural safeguards under IDEA at least once annually. They must also be given upon initial referral or your request for an evaluation, in accordance with the discipline procedures when a change in placement occurs, upon receipt of the first state complaint of the school year, upon receipt of the first request for a due process hearing in a school year, and any time the parent requests a copy. A copy of the procedural safeguards can be found in the Introduction and Overview links on the Parent Support Parent Trainings page. Click on that link to find copies of the procedural safeguards in English, Spanish, Chinese, Haitian Creole, French, German, Portuguese, Russian, Tagalog, and Vietnamese. Your child's medically diagnosed disability may or may not coincide with their ESE program category. This can be difficult for some parents to understand. Although it is commonly connected, there may be times when a child's medical diagnosis does not correlate to their educational need for special education services. Eligibility and identification into one category is all that is necessary for your child to qualify for the individualized services that he or she needs. The state of Florida has identified 15 ESE program categories. The state definitions and criteria for eligibility can be found on the District Special Programs and Procedures Resources document. The link to that document is listed in the Introduction and Overview links found on the same page as this training. IDEA and state board rules require all school districts to identify, locate, and evaluate all students with disabilities residing in their district. This requirement is met through the implementation of a multi-tiered system of support, or MTSS, through a problem-solving response to intervention framework, or RTI. Several factors can lead to the need for a student to be evaluated. If the parent requests an evaluation, if student data indicates the student has not made adequate progress despite receiving core instruction and intensive individualized instruction, if the school team determines that the student needs intensive interventions for sustained time with substantial effort, or if the nature and severity of the student's areas of concern make the general education interventions inappropriate. There are many different ways the acronym IEP is used. It is important that you are familiar with all of them. The I stands for individual or individualized. The E always stands for education. And the P, well, the P is the tricky one. It is often used for any of the following: program, paper, or plan. An individual education program is what your child will receive after they have been identified as needing exceptional student education services. OCPS defines the IEP as: the IEP is a diagram or strategy designed to help a student with a disability participate in the general education curriculum and work toward his or her desired post-school outcome. Paper. The paperwork upon which your child's program is detailed may also be called his or her IEP, as in when someone gives you a stack of papers and says, "Here is a copy of your child's IEP." When a team meeting is scheduled at the school to discuss your child's individual needs, you may hear people say, "We have an IEP scheduled for 2 o'clock." but the primary way that IEP is used is when referencing your child's individual education plan. In the state of Florida, exceptional student education includes students with disabilities as well as students who are gifted, as both sets of students have educational needs that require educational interventions to suit that student's unique educational needs in the general education classroom. An EP, or educational plan, should provide a clear picture of the student and should provide detailed information that's useful to school personnel and to the parents. The EP should identify the needs of the student related to his or her special areas of giftedness. Similar to an IEP for students with disabilities, an EP is a written plan for each child who is identified as eligible for gifted education. An EP describes the student's educational needs and the services that will be provided to meet those needs. All IEP teams must include the parents, a general education teacher, an ESE teacher, and the staffing specialist or LEA representative. Other team members may also be required depending on the purpose of the meeting. This is the minimum requirement for all IEP meetings under IDEA. It is important to remember that the roles above are not necessarily individual persons. Any participant can, and usually does, represent more than one role. The first step in the IEP process is that you will be notified in writing that the school is scheduling an IEP team meeting to discuss your child. You will have to reply that you will attend and if you would like to bring someone with you. The meeting notice will include a parent input form. This provides parents the opportunity to add personal input to the team preparing any draft IEP documents. It's important to complete and return the input form prior to the meeting along with your response to attend the meeting. When you get to the meeting, you may be surprised to see many professionals sitting at the table waiting to speak with you to discuss the outcomes of evaluations. Please don't be put off. You are an equal member of this group. Different professionals have been invited to discuss with you the evaluations your child was given and what their findings were. Feel free to ask questions if you don't understand something. They are all there to help. On the IEP, there is the present level of academic achievement and functional performance statement. More commonly called a present level statement, this describes your child's strengths and lists the way your child's disability affects their education. This statement is very important in driving the rest of your child's IEP and is created using data. All services, supports, and goals are based upon this statement, so it is important that this statement is a genuine reflection of your child. Discussing desired outcomes is your chance to let the school know what you expect from your child's education. Considering your child's disability, do you expect your child to graduate high school with a functional reading level? Or do you expect your child to go to college, to be an engineer, or to have skills to work in a sheltered work site? Finally, priority educational needs. These needs are categorized into 4 domains or topics: curriculum, social emotional, communication, and independent functioning. Your child's IEP may or may not address each of these 4 areas depending upon the individual needs of your child. Now that you know a little about the IEP meeting, let's discuss how you can prepare yourself for one. Going into the IEP meeting with good information about your child and what you hope to accomplish in the IEP meeting will give you more confidence and control in the situation. Parents are an important part of the IEP team, perhaps the most important team player in helping the others understand who your child is. Some materials available on our website that can help you to prepare are getting ready for your child's IEP meeting, knowing what will be happening during the meeting and who all the team members are will make you more comfortable with the whole process. The meeting preparation checklist. Know what has been done for your child in the past and what may help in the future. The positive student profile. Fill it out or write a short biography on your child. Tell who they are, what they like to do, their strengths. Include a nice picture if you like. Be sure to include any specific healthcare or behavioral needs. 5 critical questions. These questions were prepared by a group of parents who have been there, and they believe that if you remember nothing else, these 5 questions will help you understand the individual education plan for your child. What does my child need to be successful in the general education classroom? How will special education services help with his or her success? When, where, how frequently, and by whom will these services be provided? How will the school assess my child's progress? And how often will I receive notice of my child's progress? And what can I do to assist in my child's progress? All of these materials can be found on the Parent Support section of the OCPS ESE website. Start by going to www.ese.ocps.net, then click on the Parent Support tab, then click on the Parent Trainings tab. Most of all, remember that you and the other members of the IEP team are all there for the same purpose, to help your child achieve their fullest potential. You may request that the IEP team meet if you have a specific concern about your child's education program. Please give the school some time to organize this meeting. It would not be reasonable to expect a team to be scheduled to meet the day after your request. You are able to request that the school gives your child more testing and evaluations if you believe he or she would benefit from different services. When you make this type of request, the IEP team will need to meet to discuss the requested evaluations and will determine what is appropriate and necessary to complete. You may bring a family member, friend, neighbor, or whomever you like to the IEP team meeting. It is important that you tell the school who you will be bringing and their relationship to you and your child. And please remember, don't be afraid to ask questions or have something explained to you. No one will know that you do not understand something unless you ask. Least restrictive environment, or LRE, means that your child with a disability will be educated to the greatest extent possible with non-disabled students. When the IEP team decides the location and frequency of your child's services, they are determining your child's placement. Your child's placement will be based upon your child's needs and upon the importance of educating your child in the least restrictive environment. You and the rest of the IEP team will begin by assuming that your child will be served in a general classroom at his or her neighborhood school. The team will then work together to identify services and supports that will help your child succeed in general classes and participate in other activities at the school. Only if the team decides that your child will not be able to make progress in general classes full-time will they consider a more restrictive placement. Possible placements include the following: a general education class for all subjects that includes special materials, technology, services, or accommodations, a general education class for some subjects, and a small special group called a resource class for other subjects, a special class for some subjects and a general education class for other subjects, a special class for all subjects, a special school for the whole day, a special place to live and go to school, or instruction at home or in a hospital. It is important to know the difference between accommodations and modifications. Accommodations are changes in how the general curriculum is presented to the student and/or how the student is expected to respond. Accommodations help students to participate and make progress in the general curriculum. Two examples of classroom accommodations are having extra time to complete tests or highlighting keywords in a reading passage. An example of student response is typing a classroom assignment instead of writing by hand. Modifications are changes in what a child is expected to learn. For most ESE students, curriculum modifications should only be considered after all types of accommodations have been exhausted. For example, a math class may be working on multiplication tables while the ESE student with a curriculum modification is working on addition. It's not typical for students in regular class settings to have the curriculum modified for them. Decisions about your child's need for accommodations and modifications are made and documented through the IEP process. Once the IEP is completed, you will want to make sure that these accommodations and modifications are making a difference in your child's progress and helping them to learn. They can be changed or tweaked at future IEP team meetings. Also, if your child's current teacher does something special that helps your child learn, make sure it gets documented on his or her IEP so future teachers can utilize that same technique. IDEA requires that schools prepare students with disabilities for life after high school. This is called post-secondary transition, or simply transition. Although federal law now allows transition IEPs to be written at age 16, Orange County Public Schools still subscribes to writing transition IEPs during the 8th grade school year or when the student turns 14 years of age, whichever comes first. The goals in the transition IEP will prepare the student for life after high school. The goals are based upon the student's needs and abilities, and most importantly, on what the student wants to do, what things interest him or her, whether or not he or she shows a particular aptitude or ability in a specific area. Some things to consider when writing the goals for the transition IEP are living arrangements. Will the student be able to live independently, or will they live with their parents or in a group setting? Independent living skills. Can the student take care of their personal needs and navigate throughout their daily life? Post-secondary training. For either school-to-work students or college-bound students. Yes, students who are college-bound need a transition IEP also. You may invite an agency to your student's transition IEP meeting. For example, one agency which can help with transition from school to work is vocational rehabilitation, commonly referred to as Voc Rehab or VR. Your school staffing specialist can invite the local VR rep to the transition IEP meeting upon request. Nationally, what children are taught in school is known as the general education curriculum. IDEA requires that students with disabilities be involved in and make progress in the general education curriculum. ESE students are expected to meet the same state requirements and district expectations as their non-disabled peers, including courses in reading, English or language arts, math, science, social studies, fine arts courses, and technology courses. Next Generation Sunshine State Standards and Florida BEST Standards, Benchmarks for Excellent Student Thinking, articulate rigorous grade level expectations in the areas of mathematics and English language arts. These standards identify the knowledge and skills students need in order to be successful in college and careers. The NGSSS access points and core content connectors represent modified standards that are aligned with and provide access to the general education standards curriculum for students with significant cognitive disabilities. On a grade-by-grade basis, these are the standards that a student must master to be promoted on to the next grade level. You may have already been notified that your child is not performing according to the grade level expectations. The IEP team is responsible for making the diploma track decision for every student with a disability who is eligible for ESE services. The IEP team must make an initial decision at the IEP meeting during the student's 8th grade year or during the school year when the student turns 14, whichever comes first. Whenever the Florida legislature makes educational changes, it affects diplomas and graduation requirements. The best way to keep track of the graduation requirements for your child is by knowing their cohort year. The freshman year of high school is your student's cohort year, and that will determine their diploma track options and the requirements for each of those options. While it is possible to change a student's diploma track, this decision should be made carefully. It's important that families be fully informed about diploma options because a student's eligibility in post-secondary education, training, employment, and military service may depend on the type of diploma a student earns. If an IEP team has reviewed a student's academic performance data and determines and documents that a student with a disability is unable to work towards the mastery of the NGSSS or Florida Best State Standards for a general education high school diploma, and that a more rigorous course of study is inappropriate, the diploma track option may be changed to better suit the student's individual needs. Your child will participate in some form of standardized testing. This type of testing is essential to compare the performance of students on a local, state, and national level. The results of standardized testing help to determine general curriculum and instructional methods used by teachers. In our state, the Florida Standards Assessment, or FSA, is used as both a standardized test and an exit exam. Students may not graduate from high school with a standard diploma unless they have passed the FSA along with EOC, or end of course exams, in each subject. FSA with accommodations is available only to ESE students. A child may take the FSA with accommodations only if those accommodations have been included on the IEP and used in the classroom so the student is familiar with the procedure. Some classroom accommodations are not appropriate for the FSA, such as having a reading passage read out loud during the reading comprehension portion of the FSA. Alternate assessment, or FAA, is only for ESE students with cognitive disabilities that are taking a curriculum that focuses on life skills training. Specific criteria must be met for a student to take the FAA, and the IEP team is responsible for documenting that the student is eligible on the IEP. The Post-Secondary Education Readiness Test, or PERT, is Florida's customized common placement test used to determine accurate course placement based on the student's skills and abilities to determine readiness for college-level courses. The TABE, or Test of Adult Basic Education, is required for enrollment in career and technical education where students can participate in vocational and technical credentialing programs through Orange Technical College. Because these other assessments are not under the purview of Florida Department of Education, the IEP or 504 plan classroom and testing accommodations will not be automatically given to students taking these exams. Requests for accommodations during these tests must be made directly to the testing authority and must be made at least 6 months prior to the testing date. The SAT, or Scholastic Aptitude Test, formerly known as the College Board's exam, is a college-ready assessment taken by college degree-seeking students. The ACT, or American College Test, is alternative to the SAT, although many college-bound students choose to take both. The Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, or ASVAB, is a test required for those individuals seeking to enlist in any of the government military service branches. It is important to note the series of emotions that surround a student being identified as requiring ESE services. As parents, we typically experience fear. We may be afraid of how this will impact our child socially. We may be afraid of what our child's future will be. We may even be afraid of explaining this to our families and what their reaction will be. Your child. Students typically feel frustration. They may be frustrated at not being able to keep up with their classmates. They may be frustrated after trying their best and still being asked to try harder. School staff. Teachers may experience feelings of concern. Why isn't this student progressing? What more could I have done to help this student learn? Going into an emotionally charged situation, it is important to think about everyone's perspective and not just your own. And most importantly, it is imperative to consider the feelings of the child and what each of the adults involved can do to counter his or her frustration. There are many community resources available for you to access. The Florida Department of Education Bureau of Exceptional Education Student Services, or FLDOE-BEES, has many useful resources and publications for parents to utilize. Topics include accommodations, access points, post-secondary education, and IEP meeting guides and information. Visit their website at www.fldoe.org. FDLRS stands for Florida Diagnostic Learning Resources System, so you can see why we call it Fiddlers. They are a component of the Florida Department of Education, and they have a parent services representative. Fiddlers offers parenting workshops and workshops geared to helping you understand your child with disabilities. Their website is www.fdlrsACTION or fiddlersaction.com. The Agency for Persons with Disabilities, which is called the APD, is the state agency that provides services to children and adults with disabilities. To qualify for services with APD, your child must have one of the following disability diagnoses: cognitive impairment, spina bifida, autism, cerebral palsy, or Prader-Willi syndrome. Their website is apdcares or apdcares.org. Finally, Children's Medical Services is for families without medical insurance. The State Department of Health has medical services and insurance programs available through CMS. Contact information for all of these community resources are on the Parent Support website. In this training module, we have discussed the definition and overall meaning of exceptional student education, or ESE. We reviewed the federal and state laws under IDEA and have gone over the IEP, all of its components, and what to expect at that first meeting. We've discussed emotions and your rights as parents, which are included as part of your procedural safeguards. Lastly, we have given you information about parent handouts linked to our website, the ESE District Parent Support Liaison, and a listing of community services. As a follow-up activity, please create a positive student profile for your child. These are excellent to share with your child's teacher, IEP or EP team, and principal. Profiles are also helpful with healthcare providers and other related agencies. A profile about your child can accompany a job application or a college application. Self-advocates also use profiles when contacting legislators and policymakers. And DARE officers, school resource officers, and community law enforcement personnel appreciate when a parent shares a child's profile with them. Find or take a current snapshot of your child and add it to the profile. Go to www.ese.ocps.net, then Parent Support, then Resources and Publications to download or print out the Positive Student Profile template. Then simply fill in the form or use it as a guide to create your own. Then share it with your child's teacher or ask the school staffing specialist to include it at your child's next IEP or EP meeting. Thank you for your participation. This concludes the Orange County Public Schools Introduction and Overview of Exceptional Student Education for Parents.